Superman the movie.
Yes.
Now, we're talking about a movie that was made at a time where people's perceptions of superheroes on screen was really ruled by their memory of Adam West, Batman, camp movies, camp TV shows, and suddenly along came Superman. This was like 78, and this is around about the same time. It's just after Star Wars and movies that were beginning to take kind of pop culture and kind of like pulp seriously. And Superman the movie kind of like hit the screens. And I remember going to see it because this is the first one that I saw. I got to see it in the cinema at the bright old age of 12.
Right.
Just the right age. So you saw Superman 4 first. That was your first Superman movie.
Correct.
When did you see Superman the movie?
Oh, that must have been a couple of years later. My brother, I think, rented it. I was still pretty young when I saw it. Again, just right in that spot of like, wow, look at that kind of thing. And they probably ran it on TV. But I mean, when I say I first saw it, usually I don't count the TV version because they cut a lot of stuff out for commercials and they rearrange stuff. So, I mean, after you watch the original version, you go like, wow, there's so much that wasn't in there. It's hard to call it seeing it when you watch it on like when it's chopped up for TV. But this one, I think, looking back at it now, probably one of the top 3 most accurate comic book movies ever made, my opinion.
Yeah, I always say it's like the best. It's like the granddaddy of all the big.
Because Adam West's one was really accurate too, in terms of the 50s and 60s comics running on giant typewriters and stuff like that.
It definitely was, and I always mention this. I think that Hollywood has complete contempt for comic book movies, not for comic book movies, but for comic books and comic book creators, because they always deviate so much from the source material and believe they can do it better.
Kind of like Batman.
So they had contempt for the source material, but they kind of were true to the source material at that time.
I think this is a better Superman movie than Batman '89 was a Batman movie because it kind of like kept that Silver Age stuff in check. I think like the tone of it, Superman smiling, like hello, goodbye, kind of thing. Like you don't see that hardly at all anymore.
Yeah, well, it is very much like a version of the Silver Age Superman with a little a little drip of gold, kind of Bronze Age and a wee bit of Golden Age just kind of dripped in there. The whole truth, justice, and American way, I think, is integral to Superman.
Well, not lately.
No, not lately at all. No, but I think it is. The filmmakers can be cynical about it if they want, but as long as they don't have the character of Superman be cynical about it, it would still work.
Well, I mean, the trouble is, Superman's he's a Midwestern character, like right flyover country, right in the heartland here in America, and that in America, that kind of attitude in the middle of America is still very, very prevalent. Like that's where you're going to find most of the people that are very patriotic. And then on the corner, or on the bookends, the West and East Coast, that's where you get more like city type stuff, more like what do you call it, competitive and jaded, I guess, if you're looking at like just overall tone of population. Cynical, yeah. So and those are the ones that are making this Midwestern character. Yeah,
exactly.
So it's twisted a little bit. But
it's interesting because you're talking about Superman as a Midwestern character. And I think of him that way as well.
He's a farm boy.
Whereas people generally approach him as he's a visitor from another planet. He's a godlike visitor from another planet. And that's the wrong approach for Superman.
No. Or Space Jesus, which I don't agree with either.
Space Jesus is roughly the same kind of approach. They make him alien from us, whereas he has to be the most human person in the story.
Oh, yeah.
And they seem to not quite understand that. So you could make a great movie going that route, but it's at the core, it's not really a Superman movie. And what this movie, directed by Richard Donner, gets right is it treats Superman, it tackles both aspects of Superman, the kind of godlike visitor from another planet and the kind of Midwestern, kind of like all-American kid. And it gets it right, and it has a good kind of like balance between them. That's what I believe.
Oh yeah. I mean, he's at the end of the day, he's raised and he got all his formative stuff from farmers. So he's a polite, hardworking guy.
Indeed.
That will help you if he can. Like the type of person in real life that might pull over and help a stranger change a tire on the side of the road when most people will be driving by, kind of thing. That's very much the idea when you're doing something like this.
Exactly.
Which this movie nailed.
The background to this was we had like a couple of producers that kind of made this movie, who the Salkins, and they had produced successfully 2 movies called The Three Musketeers and The Four Musketeers. This is Alexander Neil Salkind. What they did at that time was they made both movies back to back. Highly controversial because they didn't tell the cast that they were doing this, so they thought they were just getting paid for making one movie. Right. Turns out it was 2. So 2 terrific, fun, swashbuckling movies made by Richard Lester, and they had the same approach when they decided to make Superman. They were kind of like, we will make both movies at the one time, and they had Richard Donner on board as a director, and they went to Mario Puzo to do the first draft of the screenplay because The Godfather was a huge success and he was the original author of the book The Godfather. Right. So they used big names like that to get finance and get money and everything together, and that was very much their approach. Big names like Marlon Brando, for instance, is Superman's dad. And even Christopher Reeve wasn't top billed. He was like a newcomer playing Superman. So their approach was like, we put together this package and we get a movie made, and you think, well, that's kind of just going to create something quite anodyne, but it's not at all, because I had Richard Donner in place, and he famously came up with the idea of sticking to one word, which was, can you remember what that word was?
What do you mean? No, continuity?
It was verisimilitude was the word.
No.
I was hoping you would remember, so I didn't have to say it. Verisimilitude. And he said, we have to stick to that, which is the truth of the character. Stick to what's true for Superman. And that's what they did pretty much throughout the movie. And so we've got Richard Donner to thank for that, I think, for that alone. And it was written by Tom Mankiewicz. He was the person that really, regardless of who's down who's been involved with the screenplay, he was the man that was brought in by Donner. And Tom Mankiewicz has got good credentials, cult credentials, for being the script writer of Diamonds Are Forever, Live and Let Die, and The Man with the Golden Gun. They had what was essentially a very kind of like original sort of like camp approach. Like they were going to do it kind of like Batman, the TV series. That was all the original scripts. And they kind of made sure that wasn't the case. They treated the character with respect. And what you ended up with was the first serious, inverted commas, serious superhero movie, I believe.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And I mean, that's not to say it was like, it was not like Zack Snyder serious.
Oh, no, it still had camp. What a lot of people complained about was the fact that it still was kind of campy. Now, you've got, as your avatar, I believe right now, you've transformed yourself into Lex Luthor.
Gene Hackman.
Yeah, Gene Hackman. So
great job.
You can see Gene Hackman here, who refused to shave his head to play Lex Luthor.
Right.
So they came up with this whole kind of conceit of the fact that he just wears wigs throughout the movie.
He would. He's a vain dude.
Exactly. And I think it's a brilliant idea, and it works perfectly for Lex Luthor. Some of the images I've got here. Now, there's things about the movie that, when I watched it recently, there's things about the movie that really do date it and kind of limit it a little bit. One of those things is the love story, which is really well handled between Clark Kent and Lois Lane, although the actual love poem song sequence where they go flying together, and she essentially has this poem about what she's thinking. Can you read my mind? Yep. That's never really bothered me, but the last time I watched it, it kind of bothered me.
It's like all done in narration boxes if it were a comic.
Yeah, exactly. But it still works. Like you say, it still works as a comic book approach to a movie.
Yeah, it's very much Lois's moment in the movie because I think a lot of people, it kind of grinds the movie to a halt a little bit. That little tiny scene where they're just kind of flying and nobody's really talking or saying anything. It's just kind of 3 minutes of check out what we can do with cranes.
Exactly. Yeah.
Check this out.
Which for the time, again, seeing it years ago, it's really impressive. Less impressive today, of course, but really impressive for its time.
Oh, absolutely.
And they spent a lot of the budget on developing a whole process of making Superman fly. And the tagline was, of course, you'll believe a man can fly.
Right.
Did you? Did you believe a man could fly, Statto?
Sure did when I was a kid.
Exactly. So did I. Because the effects put in context at the time are really quite spectacular.
And even so, it looks really good today.
It does. It still looks good today. Some of the miniature effects, not quite so good, which is a shame because Derek Meddings was involved and he did a lot of really good miniature effects on other movies.
See a tiny little puppet zooming around a model city.
Yeah, and there was there's a sequence where you've got the avalanche at the dam with all the rocks, which I believe I saw that being used in about half a dozen different TV shows as well. It was like reused by other shows, after the years after the movie came out. I'm sure I saw that exact footage in an episode of The Incredible Hulk.
I feel like some of that stuff was pioneered from the or not pioneered, but borrowed a little bit from the old Captain Marvel serial. What they would do is they would take a dummy, put it on a big cable, and it was like a life-size dummy, and then they'd just shoot a wide shot of the thing going shooting off into the sky.
Yeah.
And it looked really convincing for 1920 or 30 or whatever it was. It looked great. So I feel like they did a little bit of that.
It's an interesting question. I've never actually thought about this before. I've seen the movie about 90 times. Why does it take him so long to catch the rockets?
Because cinematic tension.
That's it. There you go. It's suspension of disbelief. Yeah, he hasn't quite realised he can fly as fast as he flies at the end of the movie.
Well, I had a lot of those great Clark Kent moments where, like, he knows there's some trouble and he's got to try to get out of it. Like, one of my favorite scenes in the movie was actually the scene where they're getting robbed in the alley.
Yeah, that's one of mine as well.
Yeah.
It's also a very kind of 70s cinema type scene that, it's very kind of like of its time. It's this nice little self-contained character piece that's also a kind of like a comedy action
Which, I mean, the robber was a little silly. Like, yeah, I'll turn over my leaf as soon as I get your wallet.
Again, that's a wee bit of the camp.
Yep, but it worked really well.
It does. You could imagine a similar scene in a Richard Donner Lethal Weapon movie. With a slight twist on it, I think. The thing that kind of stuck out for me watching it this time, and I watched the original cinematic cut because I like to just see it as I remember it.
Okay.
There's so many different cuts. You've got the extended cut, you've got the TV cut, all the different cuts. I always like to go back to the original cinematic cut.
Yeah, I've got the expanded one myself.
Yeah, but what stands out for me is that without John Williams, this might not work half as well as it does.
Yeah. This one's it's one of his more memorable ones, absolutely, for sure. Well, everybody knows it.
Yeah, indeed.
It's tough to say a lot. I mean, when you're looking at it, and I watched a bunch of these again with a very objective eye. I had to take out any love that I had for him and just look at this with a very technical standpoint. And it is tough to say when you're looking at it from when it was made a lot bad about this movie.
Yeah.
It was a game changer in a lot of ways. And I don't think that the 89 Batman would be nearly what it was if it weren't for this movie.
As much as I loved Star Wars when I saw it as a kid, and I always say this, I liked Superman was my Star Wars because I'd read the comics. I'd read a collection of like the comics from the 30s all the way through the 70s, and this Superman kind of resonated with me because I was reading Silver Age stuff and Golden Age stuff all at the same time. And I would make excuses for things that maybe seemed a bit odd. So when the conclusion of the movie, he turns back time by rotating the Earth backwards on his axis.
Yeah.
Now I always just assumed as a kid that's just a visual representation of time travel.
Oh, you think so?
Yeah, I just assumed that, and for years I just thought that's just a visual representation of time travel. That's the way they decided to visually represent it on screen.
Well, now we can say he hit the Speed Force.
Exactly. Now we can say stuff like that. But then Tom Mankiewicz actually says he rotates the Earth backwards on its axis.
Slams everybody against the opposite wall at 10 million miles an hour.
Yeah, I'm like, no, that doesn't work, mate.
No,
so my 12-year-old brain had worked out. That's just like in the comics when he flies through the time tunnel to go and visit the Legion of Superheroes.
You absolutely can't look at this with a real world eye. You just
exactly. I think you've got to have that 12, 13-year-old, 8-year-old even approach.
And that's a Silver Age thing too. I mean, they used to do that kind of thing all the time. Kryptonite would change him into something different for 6 pages for a quick story, or and then gee, it just wore off.
The one thing that they missed in all the movies is we didn't have a single movie where he fought a giant ape.
Right. Well, I mean, this is at a time when they didn't really feel. I mean, like, since it's make believe, you don't need real world science to explain it. You just don't.
No, you don't. Superman the movie wasn't smooth as far as the behind the scenes went.
Oh no,
because Richard Donner did not get on well with the Salkinds, and so when they were filming Superman the movie, they brought in Richard Lester, who they owed. I think they owed money to Richard Lester because of the what they did, when they were making the 3 and 4 Musketeers. But whatever, I think they owed him or whatever. So they brought him in and gave him a job as a kind of like a producer on Superman the movie, and he was there as a kind of like in between the Salkinds and between Richard Donner. And poor old Richard Lester was like stuck in the middle. It was, however, Richard Lester's idea to have the Turn Back the World ending. They didn't have an ending for Superman the movie.
I like to think every time they reboot a franchise, this happens.
Yeah, I would hope so.
That's a visual like reboot.
Yeah, so they didn't have an ending. So Richard Lester said, "Well, you've got an ending in your second part. That would work perfectly for this." And so they ended up doing that. So his thinking was they ended up with one complete movie, rather than actually thinking too much about the continuation, how they were going to end the second one. That kind of put him in a position, because with the second one, he was, of course, going to be the director. Does it hold up today?
I think for the most part, I'd say about 80-90% of it does. There are a couple of things that you go, like, now that could be done better, or that's just kind of archaic looking, but otherwise, yeah. It's kind of a drama with superpowers.
Yeah, I agree. I think it does. I think it's still... I went into it thinking I'm going to watch like the best superhero movie ever made, because that's how I look on it. But it's really it's the most important superhero movie ever made is what I mean when I say that.
Big pivoting point, yeah.
Exactly. It does hold up. However, there's a lot of stuff, and I was watching the theatrical cut, remember, which is slightly shorter. There's a lot of stuff that does slow it down and kind of hold up a little bit. It wouldn't bother people in 1978, because funnily enough, we were used to slower pacing back then, than nowadays.
Movies have a much more deliberate pace.
Yeah, but all the stuff with the Rocket and where Lex Luthor and Miss Teschmacher and Ned Beatty's character, they're doing all this stuff to kind of get to the Rocket, and that does drag now when you watch the movie a little bit.
Oh yeah, and I will say probably my biggest thing with this movie is the Jor-El. I'm never a giant fan of what's his face?
Yeah, Marlon Brando.
Brando.
It doesn't bother me. He's okay. He's not really. He's
just kind of there.
He's felt in the movie, but to be honest, when they replace him in 2, it didn't bother me.
Right.
Okay. So Superman the movie, the most important superhero movie ever made, I think, and it still stands up to the test of time. If anybody in the chat hasn't watched it, at least 5 times, stop watching us. Go and watch Superman the movie.
And the beautiful thing is, it's so readily, and you can buy it like super cheap in like collections that pretty much get all 4 Reeve movies together. You
can get collections now that are super cheap that will give you all 4 of Reeve's movies: Supergirl, Superman and the Mole Men, and the Fleischer cartoons, which are all brilliant. You can get all that stuff in like really cheap sets these days.
You can get all 4 of these movies in a collection over there for what, £8?
Yeah, thereabouts.
Yeah, it's a solid recommendation for me as far as
me too.
Historical, if anything.
Forget the Snyder cut of anything. You just want the original Richard Donner Superman the movie.